Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you are doing well. I hope you are the best you can be at this moment in time and that you're making the best of your circumstances. And I am glad to be here with you now. I just landed about an hour ago from a transatlantic flight. I had been in London, England for the past couple of days. With my wife. I was very fortunate enough to get to attend the North London Derby in the Premier League. That would be Arsenal versus Tottenham Hotspur at the Emirates Stadium, which was an incredibly amazing time. One of the most memorable sporting live sports experiences I have had, and I will remember it forever. Not just because the game was very entertaining, because the seat was great. I will remember it for the volume. I've been to some very passionate and exciting soccer games or football for my international listeners, but the sheer volume of chanting from Arsenal fans was staggering. It was very cool. And it was very exciting. And I don't know if maybe it was because it's the big rivalry game against the hated local rivals. I don't know. But it was a really incredible experience to get to see the North London Derby live. And I'm happy I got to do it. But before I was in London, my wife and I were in Paris, France for a couple days. And that's what we're going to talk about on the show today. Because today's episode, I'm going to share with you my experience performing stand-up comedy in English in Paris, and then we will resume our regular hour-long interviews next week. So thank you guys again for being here for this kind of unusual, shorter episode of Between Awesome and Disaster. But a big part of what I am trying to be as a comic is this kind of globe is incorporating my international travels and this kind of global way of thinking. Like, I like the idea of being able to perform comedy in all manner of countries and relate to whoever I'm in front of. And I love the idea of international stand-up comedy. Specifically, I'm inspired by the comedian Tom Rhodes, who is an incredibly funny comic, incredibly great guy who I've had a chance to meet and talk to on this show. And the idea of touring the world and doing stand-up is very appealing to me. And so I'm, in a very micro way, in my own way, am able to do that. And I was able to reach out to a couple of produced shows that occur weekly, actually, in Paris, and I have the audio of my performances from those, as well as a quick chat with one of the hosts of that show, and we're going to talk a little bit about that when we get into this here. But the first thing I want to play for you guys is audio from my first show in Paris at a show called Unstable Comedy, which is on Instagram. I'll have links in the description. And this show was incredibly fun. It was a little tiny room in the basement of this very cool bar in Paris that I had heard was originally a horse stable back in the day, but it goes down a long flight of stairs, and there's all these like little offshoots of the main hallway that I was told were originally horse stables, and the show occurred in one of these little offshoots, and it was a packed room. The audience was incredibly nice, and I did about, I'd say, 6 or 7 minutes, and I was trying, and you'll hear it when I'm doing this, like, because I'm still not performing as regularly as I was prior to COVID. Be that I don't know if that's now on me or the pandemic, but I'm still not the kind of, I'd say not me. Well, I would say I'm not as still not feeling as sharp as I was on stage prior to the pandemic. But I have a confidence from 15 years of doing this. But you'll hear in the audio, like, I'm working from my notes, and uh, there's still some kinks that I'm working through in terms of my overall rhythm. But I did work on some local jokes about being in Paris, a couple of new things and things that I know that I like that I have been doing for a while. And I'm going to present that audio to you completely unedited so that you can get a full idea of what it was like to be in that room. And we'll talk about it afterwards. So thank you guys again so much for being here. And let's go to me doing comedy in Paris, France.
Keep it going for Anna, everybody. Thanks for coming out and supporting live comedy. This is my second day in Paris. I'm really have enjoyed this city so far. I'm really trying to integrate myself into the city. I've started taking all of my photos in front of Versailles today, for example, in black and white. And and as somebody who's watched the first 20 minutes of a lot of French New Wave cinema, I'm practicing what I call Cannes Film Festival face, as I've observed on all the movie posters here. You just get a forlorn human to gaze wistfully into the middle distance, preferably at an ocean, and contemplate on the nature of love and if it even exists. And then someone says, "I never loved with you." Here's what I'm talking about. This face. Grand jury prize, please. I'm so happy to be here. Paris is my kind of town because Paris is. I'm a big food person, as you can tell by looking at me. And Paris is like a butter-centric cooking culture, and I like that about this town because if you, I saw somebody try to ask for margarine at a brasserie, and they were just thrown out into the street. I enjoy the commitment to principles. So I am from New York City, and I was walking. Thank you. I was walking through the streets there recently, and I saw a guy wearing a T-shirt with an outline of the state of Texas on it, with a gun that said, "We don't dial 911." And that made me feel really bad for everybody in Texas that's ever needed a fire truck. It's like, yes, my house was on fire, so I shot it 83 times. I considered the fire an act of aggression. That's the kind of shirt my dad would wear. If you can imagine, my dad is if you can just imagine your stereotype of what every American is like, that's my dad. He's Yosemite Sam in a Hawaiian shirt. He's a big proponent of the good guy with a gun theory, that if there's a good guy with a gun, he can prevent something bad from happening. He also thinks that if somebody's drowning, you should give them a glass of water. So we don't get along very well, and the reason, and I'll tell you, to sum up our relationship, it's been rocky for a while. It was rocky for a bit, but I have a one-person show, and if you've ever been invited to your friend's one-person theatrical show, you're nodding your head. They all could start like this. If it was Wednesday in my house, that meant Dad was drinking. And in my house, every day was Wednesday. You're gonna love this one. It's important to have confidence in comedy. I went to an antique store. They were out of stock. They couldn't get anything new in. Check mark. I think General Hospital should be more specific. I have a sweet tooth. It's delicious. Another great one. I've got a friend who's dyslexic, but he only speaks in palindromes, so you don't really notice. I'm in my mid-30s now, and I didn't think I was as old as I feel, or look as old as I feel, but when I get into cabs, the driver always puts smooth jazz on. And it's like, I know I'm white, but I didn't realize I was that white. And I think getting so I got to pick like my middle-aged man thing to do, and I'm not sure what it's going to be. But for most people I know, I think getting really into World War II history is the male equivalent of menopause. Like one day you know every song on the radio, you know the names of every artist, you know what's coming out in the movie theaters, and then the next day you're just like, you know what? I need to learn more about the storming of Normandy. It's history. I'm a big fan of the singer Adele, and I think every Adele song, if a man sings it, is immediately threatening. Because she's got a beautiful voice, but if you could just...
I drink wine? That should not be a threat.
I drink wine. I'm not personally familiar with that one, but again, just imagine if you were to just find outside your house the written on some text, the words, "Hello, it's me." You have to go into witness protection after that. I'm pretty sure her next album will just be her singing Jack the Ripper's threatening letters to the police. That'll be lauded as conceptually adventurous. I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself. I grew up about an hour south of Washington, D.C. And I originally thought I was from a very small town, but I found out recently that my town is too small to even be considered a town. It's not even big enough to be considered a hamlet or a village. I'm officially from a census-designated place. So what that means is that I'm from just a big enough collection of humans living in the woods that the United States government looked at that and thought, we got to keep an eye on that. I don't want any revolution, and I don't want any ideas happening out there in the woods. Because a lot of Americans are afraid of big cities like New York, Paris, Los Angeles, Chicago, exactly, Detroit. But I'm not. What I'm most afraid of is from sparsely populated parts of the United States that are heavily infested with trees that have cabins. Because that's where everybody that gets a Netflix documentary is from. Like, for example, I've got a friend, he wears round glasses, kind of like this. He's got a full mountain man beard, and he's currently building a cabin in Maine, the woods of Maine, like northern United States. So I know in a couple of years I'm just going to end up on the news or on some kind of streaming documentary saying, well, he was always nice to me. I mean, now that I think about it, he has a lot of ideas about how the government should run. But otherwise, very nice. Folks, that's my time. You guys have been wonderful. Thank you so much, Paris. This has been great. Are you guys ready for more show? You're going to have a great time tonight. Keep it going for your next comic. Keep it going for Busha, everybody. Over here.
I felt really good about that show, specifically because I was able to write some jokes that afternoon specifically about my experiences traveling in Paris, and those went very well as a couple of new things. If I was going to give myself an honest critique, I would probably give myself closer to like an 80 or 78, only because I had to look at my notebook a couple times and I fell back on some older jokes. But overall, that was a very fun experience, and I enjoyed it very, very much. I'm going to now play for you guys the audio from my second show that I did the next night in Paris at a show called I Forgot My Notes, which is hosted by a gentleman named Terrence Wong. And you can find the information for all of these shows on the Instagram page, English Stand-Up Comedy in Paris, on Instagram. If you live in Paris, that's a great resource for finding English language stand-up if you are curious. And this particular show, going into it, I know was not a traditional stand-up show. Essentially, it was. I was told that a PowerPoint presentation was going to be made, and I would be giving the presentation as if I had done it before, but this would be the first time that I saw the PowerPoint would be on stage while I was performing. So I was essentially making up a presentation as I went along. After I did one, every comic usually did about like one bit or a bit and a half before getting into this. But I thought the concept was really funny, and one of my favorite things to do, as I'm want to do in improv scenes, is just kind of riff off the cuff and just kind of talk off the top of my head. And so I was particularly excited to do this one. So Terrence was nice enough to include me on the show at another great venue, that a South African bar in Paris, that I believe also was like a cave from like the 12th century or something like that. All of the buildings that I performed in Paris had very unique and interesting histories. So when you listen to this audio, you're not going to see the slides that I'm reacting to on stage. You can go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/willcarrieisfunny, to get the video of this show. But to just kind of give you an idea, I believe I say the topic of my presentation, and then the pictures I'm reacting to are a picture of Donald Trump with tiny hands, Aunt Cass from Big Hero 6, and a quote saying "It's so big," a bunch of, and then a kid being held down and tickled, and then my closing slide is a big goldfish in a small bowl and a small goldfish in a big bowl. So that's what I'm reacting to. And again, everything you say, with the exception of the bit about the restaurant at the beginning, is me completely making it up on stage off the top of my head and really having a fun time doing it. So this is, again, my set from I Forgot My Notes.
All right, I want you to make a round of applause for our next presenter, Will Carey. Keep it going here, Terrence, everybody. Thank you, Paris. It's great to be here. I am empathetic to the plight of the unemployed folks in the audience. I thought the job interview process is laborious and tenuous at best. Why do you want to work here? Because I'm hungry and need money to eat. I recently, when I was coming here, in order to get a reservation at a restaurant, I had to apply to get the reservation. And what is that interview like? Can you tell us about a time when you were eating at a previous restaurant and faced a conflict, and how you overcame it? When you are eating at a restaurant, do you get along well with others in group settings? What restaurant do you see yourself eating at in 5 years? The answer is always this restaurant, but just at a nicer table. And folks, I'm from New York City. I've come a long way to share something that is very close to me, very personal to my heart, to my mind, and I want to impart it onto you and to your hearts and minds to create one globally connected community. And we're going to do that today with my talk that is titled "Why Small is the New Big" by Will Carey. Now, I am an authority on this. As you can see, I am almost 2 meters. I am almost 2 meters tall, and I have hit my head on the finest arches in your fair city, Paris. So, as an authority on the new big, I was an old big, as they call. We're going to discuss the minutia of the minute, and what makes the small of today the big of tomorrow. We're going to move on to our next slide here. We're going to discuss our themes. Now, as an American, 2016 to 2020 is a bit of a haze for all of us who live in New York, because I have to specify everywhere I go that I live in New York City and was not involved with this character. Even though he used to live only a few blocks away from where I used to live. Now, again, we're talking about small being the new big, and it is very important when you discuss big things, as if you are small, to gesture bigly. It is very important to make the most bigly of big gestures. If you can continuously be tracing as you're talking, no one will focus on what is known as small. They'll only focus on the bigger picture, and that is the problem with which you are going to create that everyone else will have to deal with after you. Uh, if, if I could speak about it in a metaphorical sense, you be the oil spill, and then the rest of the people around you will be the people with Dawn dish soap scrubbing birds for the next 5 years. But as you can see, they will have to be working exceptionally harder as to hold the toothbrush to get the oil off of the birds. They'll have to work twice as hard, but with twice as much heart. And if we can move on to our next part of the presentation here, that's quite big. Something that I've heard a few times before. This, of course, as you can see, this is from a underrated Disney movie, Big Hero 6, which is also what my wife calls me. Now, you're gonna want, this is for to make small the new big. This is gonna be our mantra. That's quite big. It is going to be something we wake up every morning and as we do our sun salutations, because I've decided everyone in Paris does yoga. Just seem like a yoga loving bunch. I can see some heads turning and some don't talk about it right now. Hand gestures. We're going to begin every day with that's quite big. That's going to be our mantra through the day. It'll be the first thing we think of in the morning. It will be the last thing we think of at night. What is quite big? It can be whatever you want to be. The thing you want to fix the most about yourself. The thing you want to fix most about the world. The thing you want to fix most about your world will be done so through the power of that's quite big. And one day you will match Aunt Cass. And if we can move along to our next part of the presentation. This feels vaguely Roman Polanski-esque. I know he's still skittering about in the night. So again, now we have all faced adversity in our lives, and sometimes adversity comes with laughter. Now, we have all been metaphorically, we have all been at one point pinned down by our own weight. We have been, whether it be mental, whether it be physical, we have had no choice but to bear the crushing width of our shirtless oppressors and laugh in the face of their tyranny as their tiny hands encroach on our personal space. And we were left thinking, what will we be? What will tomorrow look like? But I'm here to say, they can't keep us down permanently. One day we will rise up and we will get a shirt before everyone else. And then we will impart the tickles onto everyone that once imparted the tyranny of tickles onto us. To summarize, let's bring this to a close. You have been a wonderful audience, and I have enjoyed getting to know you. So if we can summarize in conclusion, while you may see yourself as the small that is part of the greater big, through my program, through mantra of that's so big, we can all become the big fish in the small pond, and we will be our own big fish of tomorrow. Paris, thank you very much. I've been very pleasure. Keep it going for your host.
Another round of applause for both players. Round of applause for both players. Let's keep it going for our next presenter.
I have only recently discovered my knack for hilarious stream of conscious riffing. And the funny thing about how I feel like I have a talent for that sort of like endlessly like absurd sort of pontification is that was staying in Alabama for work for long periods of time earlier this year, I would make these funny parodies of YouTube unboxing videos based on when she would order shoes that would come to the apartment, and I would just sort of like not script these and just sort of like talk and riff and free associate off the top. And it was when she showed them to her parents and they were laughing the entire time, I thought, oh, maybe I could do some more of that. And so getting able to kind of work that muscle, the like improvisation muscle in front of people, because I haven't done an improv jam or improv show in a very long time. And getting able to work that muscle was quite fun. And the last thing I want to share with you guys, going back to the previous show, Unstable Comedy, after the show, I was able to have a quick chat with one of the producers of the show who also performed that night, Rebecca Ann, a comic who's relatively new to stand-up as well as the live performance scene in Paris. And a big part of that is in part to the pandemic. But I was very excited to kind of get a little bit of an insight to what it's like to live in France, to be a performer in France, and the English scene, performing scene for stand-up versus the performing and French scene, which is naturally bigger. The English scene in Paris is up and coming, but as someone who's spends a lot of time in the has spent a lot of time in the alternative scene and DIY rooms and is very punk rock, I relate to that. So here's a quick chat with Rebecca Ann. This took place in the same room that the show took place in. So it might not be the highest. It's not going to be the highest audio quality that you would expect on previous episodes of that show. So I do apologize for that, but it is very much in the moment, and it happened right in the same space where the show happened. And let's chat with let's have a quick chat with Rebecca Ann, stand-up comic in Paris, France. Oh yeah. So you was Zoom comedy when you first started doing stand-up, or you had
No.
been doing stand-up for a while?
I had not been doing stand-up for a while. I had actually only just gotten into the scene in Paris,
Uh-huh.
and I had just gotten started, and then the pandemic hit. So I got into Zoom comedy. Zoom comedy sucks.
Zoom is. I found I did one Zoom show in the pandemic, and just the rhythm is a little odd. It's like
Yeah.
like I've had to do tons of podcasts over Zoom, and just the rhythm of the conversation is off. So yeah, it's an odd medium.
And it was also weird standing in my house talking to myself. You know, it's not like being in a room where you can.
Yeah.
No matter how hard you work, you know, everyone turn your screens on and you set it up. You can't see the reactions.
Right.
You have to just keep plowing on and hope people are enjoying it. But that's okay because I'm a teacher and I'm used to talking to myself.
My mom was an elementary school teacher for 31 years. So
Yes, she's probably also very good at it.
Yes, I can relate to that. Okay, so Zoom during the pandemic,
Yeah.
kind of forces everyone to go online.
And the thing is Zoom comedy got a really bad rap.
Mm-hmm.
And it does suck. It does suck. And if you're trying to compare it to what you get from from a live show,
Mm-hmm.
you're not. It sucks.
Yeah.
And it
it's
sucks
not the
for
same.
audience members too, because I'm sorry, like the reality is if you can choose to go on Netflix and watch Bo Burnham, or you can come into my little Zoom room, I mean, what are you going to choose, right?
Right.
What Zoom comedy was really amazing for was as workshops and networking.
Totally.
And I ended up getting a bit of a network around Europe,
Yeah.
which was really cool. I have a bit of it, like I had some people in America as well, in Canada. That one now, like I haven't made as much use of that because getting over there is a lot harder. But,
Sure.
you know, Berlin, Spain, Amsterdam, Belgium, Luxembourg. I either have performed or will perform in a lot. Like I went to Dublin and London to perform, and all of those on the back of the connections I made through Zoom comedy. So if you're looking for like international
Oh yeah.
comedy stuff, like the Zoom
Absolutely.
Comedy Network, and I was sort of hoping that would continue after the pandemic, not to replace shows, but as networking and workshopping for comedians. It has a little bit. But
Very. That makes total sense to me. That's really cool. That, you know, by nature of like just having to be online, you can like grow and meet all these people in these different places, and then it actually translates to real life. How? So you've been in Paris for 5 years, you were saying?
yes, I moved here 5 years ago. I now split my time. This year I split my time between Bordeaux and Paris.
Bordeaux and Paris. And where did you live before you moved to France?
Where didn't I live before I moved to France? I'm Canadian, but I'm a teacher, so I was traveling. I spent a lot of time traveling. I lived in China, I lived in Moscow, I lived in Haiti, Korea, Thailand. But I met my French husband in Shanghai, so here I
Shanghai?
am. Yeah.
Oh wow! So you were like a globetrotter.
Yep. But I unfortunately didn't get into comedy until I got to Paris, so I don't have that experience. But yeah, I was all over the place.
Nice. And teaching that makes sense to me because I feel like teaching in other countries other than the United States is valued much more highly. I've gotten this impression.
In some countries.
In some countries.
So I definitely felt that was true in China and Korea. To a certain extent in Russia.
Okay.
Though I was in Russia 10 years ago and lots of things have changed. I wouldn't want to speak to anything that is normal there now. I do not feel that way in France. Teachers are not that well regarded in France.
I see. Interesting.
We're okay in Canada. I've noticed, I mean, it also depends on how you show respect to teachers. You can look at, you know, in Canada, people sort of look down their nose at them a little bit, but we're paid pretty well, so it doesn't matter.
Right. No, that makes sense. So okay, so you're traveling all around the world, and then, so comedy is relatively new for you then.
Yes, I've been doing comedy for probably about 4 years, off and on.
Gotcha. And how long has this show, which we're talking for listeners, we're talking in the basement of this very cool bar in Paris. The show's called Unstable Comedy.
Yeah, so Unstable Comedy was, we were supposed to have our first live show booked right before we shut down in March 2020.
Oh no.
So we didn't get that first live show. And we moved on to Zoom.
Right.
And that was sort of how we survived the pandemic as a show. We were really lucky that the bar kept our spot for us after they, like, first of all, we were lucky that the bar, our venue, managed to survive the pandemic. A lot of comedy in Paris, they were either the show didn't make it through the pandemic or they were scrambling to find new venues just because of the bars and restaurants and venues that didn't make it through. We were lucky that both this one made it through and that they saved our spot for us. So we've been back. So we've been going we've been going for 2.5 years. We've been back live for a little over a year and a half now.
Awesome. And it's been going well because this show tonight was really great. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. You guys were awesome.
That's just like I'm sure one of many random American comedians who might hit you up,
but some of you are better than others, and you did very well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. One other thing I want to ask, because I have another show tomorrow night at the I Forgot My Notes.
Yes.
I'm generally curious. What's your idea of like the overall tone of the Paris stand-up comedy fan. I have it in my head that like Paris is like maybe more intellectual when it comes to their comedy, but then I've also turned on French comedy TV and seen stuff that I would consider maybe more broad.
So, first of all, I only really know the English comedy scene in Paris. And there are definitely two comedy scenes. There's the English comedy scene and the French comedy scene. The French comedy scene is much bigger. It's much more well known. It's, you know, because everybody speaks French.
Exactly.
And they are certainly more, they have more of the stereotype. From what I know, I don't perform in French. Some of my English colleagues do manage to perform in both languages. I don't yet. From what I know, though, they are more varied in their topics just because they're bigger, and they are some of the more stereotypical sides of comedy come out there, that more cutthroat, more competitive, more because that's where the money is.
Sure.
The English scene is it's a baby scene. Before the pandemic, we probably had, there's 2 or 3 shows that have been going for a decade. Professional shows, they're really good. And before the pandemic, we probably had 5 or 6 shows, of which a few made it through. After the pandemic, we've seen in the last year an explosion. And there's now, we went from having a couple of shows to having 1 every night, and now we're starting to double up. There's some nights we have 2 or 3 shows. We're at this...
Great.
Yeah, it's really great. It's really amazing to see. We now have 2 open mics instead of, you know, where there were none. Now we've got 2.
Great.
And as you know, open mics are essential to a scene.
Most certainly.
We've got shows at different levels. We've got open mics. We've got some professional shows. We've got the ones in the middle. We even have enough of a market that some of our comedians, like there's people who are able to do their 1 hours pretty regularly in Paris, that there's enough of a market there for that. So we're growing.
Amazing.
But the tone, I would say, it's... I haven't performed in America or Canada. I have performed in London and Dublin, Luxembourg. I would say that, and based on what I know of some of those other scenes, I would say the Parisian scene is probably a little more collegial. It's not as competitive.
Yeah.
It definitely feels more like a community a lot of the time, and I think a lot of us work pretty hard to maintain that when we can. In terms of the style of comedy, like if you say that we're more intellectual, I'd like to think that was true. Thank you. But we tell our share of dick jokes.
Oh, of course. I guess I have this distinction in my head with, especially with like American stand-up, like there's this imagined divide, and I don't know if it entirely exists too much, of like the alternative scene, the like, you know, the like Janine Garofalo, like Patton Oswalt, that scene, the like uncabaret kind of world, and the comedy club world, where like Comedy Store, improv, where it's more like broader humor, like relationship stuff, drug stuff, etc. Whereas like alt scene, like I don't know if I could make Cannes Film Festival jokes work in mainstream American comedy clubs, maybe, but I mean, you can always fall back on dick jokes. There's that's one of those things that is, I think, universal, and I've been able to do comedy kind of in a bunch of different countries too, and there's always some version of that.
Right. I think I don't really see, if I was to see a divide here, I'd see people who like more American style of comedy and more British style of comedy.
Okay.
And like you, I'm not sure if that divide actually exists, but surely
it might just be in our heads.
But that stereotype does. And again, you can't really say that there's an American style or a British style, but in as much as you can say there is one, the British tend to be more deadpan, more
drier.
rely more on wordplay. The American style tends to rely a little bit more, it's more physical, it's a little bigger.
Sure.
I would say here people, I think it's just because there's more of a British influence here, people tend to appreciate more of the British style, but that's changing as things are opening up. And now the scene is becoming a little more, like I said, there's a lot more American visitors this year than there were last year.
Yep.
I'm not really sure if there's any one thing I could really, like I don't think I could really say that we go one way or the other. I think certain shows do within the scene.
Gotcha.
But I don't think we could say, yeah, because we're so international. We have people from Africa, we have people from India, we have people from Canada, the States, Britain. It doesn't really go one way or the other.
Yeah, and I love that. Like, I remember when I first moved to New York, I would do shows at a hostel, and I would get to perform in front of whoever was there, and I loved doing that because it's like, okay, all right, this is part of the thing. Or like shows in Times Square where you get like tourists that are barked in, and you're gonna get a crowd from everywhere else. I view that as like a real challenge of like, how can I make these people who probably have very different experience from mine, how can I relate to them? How can I make them laugh? That's kind of the fun part of it for me.
For me, part of it is, depending on the show I go to, we get very different audiences. So being able to tailor my jokes. So, I go to one show and the audience is at a club that's been around for a long time, and the audience is French people who speak English. I go to another show and they're all expats. Another show we've managed to pull in, just wherever the marketing is, we've managed to pull in students. So yeah, same. I can definitely relate to that.
That's so cool. Well, one thing last thing I'll ask you, and thanks again for chatting with me. What can we plug before we get out here? Where can people find you, Rebecca?
Oh, well, you can find Unstable Comedy with my co-host El Scratty. We're on Instagram at Unstable Comedy Paris, and you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Rebecca Ann Comedy.
Awesome. And thank you so much again for having me on tonight. This was really fun. I really appreciate it.
Well, we really enjoyed having you. You did a great job. It was really great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, that is our show for today. That is a chronicling of my time performing comedy in the great city of Paris, France. And I hope you enjoyed this. And if you are a Paris resident and are looking to attend English stand-up comedy, you can check out Unstable Comedy on Instagram. And you can also go to comedyinparis.com/unstable-comedy. And Rebecca Ann is on Instagram at Rebecca Ann Comedy, ANNE. And if you are interested in finding out what else this podcast is about, I have we're coming up on 300 episodes very soon. And I will have another episode with Cody Ritchie from the band Goalkeeper very soon, as their new album, I Wish I Met You Sooner, will be released later this month, I think. Actually, you can go to awesomedisaster.com, find links to everything related to me, including my Facebook, my Twitter, at Comic Will Carry, at Will Carry 23 on Instagram, as well as a contact form. If you want to send me a message, you can go ahead and send me a message. If you want to take another step in supporting the show, you can go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster, and you can also check out the merch store, which is, again, also everything is available at awesomedisaster.com. And if you are a comedy booker in a foreign country, you can feel free to contact me. I love to travel, and I want to perform anywhere I can in this great, beautiful little blue marble that we call Earth. So thank you guys again for being here, and I will see you next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, wear mask, get vaxxed and boosted, and stomp out fascism. Take care, everybody.